All right, welcome to Talking Investing. I'm Tom, and as always, this is not financial advice. Today, I want to talk about Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners. This is a weekend edition, so we're going to go through what the Bitcoin miners did this week, what Bitcoin did this week. We're going to take a look at a bunch of charts that I've put together. Also, I want to look at a few other underlying reasons that I think we're getting this price action in the short term, particularly on the Bitcoin miners, but we will also take a look at the Bitcoin chart itself. We talk about Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners all the time on this channel. If that is content that you're interested in, please consider subscribing to the channel. We are pushing towards 20,000 subscribers, so I want to thank everybody that has subscribed recently. And in addition to that, if you guys would consider smashing the like button, we're going for 500 likes. You guys have helped the channel out a lot by hitting the like button. It really does make a gigantic difference. Okay, so with all that said, let's get into Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners. All right, the first chart we're going to take a look at is what happened week over week. So this week, actually, if you look at the chart, it's very red, but this actually, I do think, represented a move in the right direction. We're going to take a look at some charts that show that Bitcoin miners have really gotten beaten up over the last 3 or 4 weeks. And I do think that this week, while it was another red week, the rate at which the Bitcoin miners are going down is decelerating compared to Bitcoin. So even though this was a red week, I actually think it was a step in the right direction. Having said that, this week did not feel good. If you held the Bitcoin miners, this was another bad week. This all started back on December 27th, so we're going to take a look at that chart next. So it's really only been, I believe, 16 trading days that the Bitcoin miners have been moving to the downside. They peaked on December 27th. Every week since then has been rough. Okay, so taking a look at this week, you'll see there's only 2 Bitcoin miners that were in the green this week. So BitDeer was up 4%, Core Scientific was up 1%. Then there's only one other Bitcoin miner that outperformed Bitcoin, and that was Any, and that was down 4%. So that was in the red. Bitcoin did have a very tough week. Bitcoin was down 5% week over week. So this was a rough week, but you're going to see that it did not leave its trading range. We're going to talk about that more when we get to the Bitcoin chart later. Okay, Stronghold was down 5%, which was the same as Bitcoin, but then you're going to see if we go down to the bottom of the list, first at the very bottom of the list, you're going to have HUT. HUT was down 30% this week. Most of that move was on a short report that was put out on them. They moved down 23 or 24% in one day this week on that short report. We will be having Sue Ennis on from Hut 8 on the channel next week to talk about that. So if you want to know what's going on there, and if you want to hear more or learn more about that short report and what Hut 8 has to say about it, they are going to come on the channel and we're going to talk about it. So this week, Hut 8 was the worst performing stock out of all the Bitcoin mining stocks, and it was absolutely due, in large part, if not in total, due to that short report. But they are not the only ones that had a bad week. You'll see Wolf was down 19%, Cypher was down 18%, Iris down 16%. Now, you'll see most of the Bitcoin miners were down more than 10%, and you'll see a big grouping down here in the 15 or 16% range. So this is what I always talk about. The Bitcoin miners tend to act as a leveraged play on Bitcoin. Bitcoin is extremely volatile. These charts are going to show this. So I all the time talk about how Bitcoin is very volatile and the Bitcoin miners are even more volatile. So, you've got to be a certain type of investor to invest in these, and it's important to understand the volatility. So you'll see in typical fashion, most of these Bitcoin miners are down about 3 times as much as Bitcoin. So while Bitcoin was down 5% this week, the majority of these were down 13, 14, 15, 16%. So you'll see actually the large Bitcoin miners, Marathon, which is the largest by far by market cap and production, they were down 15% this week. CleanSpark, which is the third largest, they were down 16%. Riot was down 12%. They are the second largest by market cap. So once again, this is another week where there really weren't very many places to hide. There were 2 in the green this week, so that's better than nothing, but another very difficult week for the Bitcoin miners. The only difference is this week was a pretty rough week for Bitcoin. Okay, now I want to take a look at a chart that I believe is the last 16 trading days in the US. So this dates back to December 27th. Almost all of the Bitcoin miners hit their high for the year in 2023 on December 27th. And then they immediately began a fairly substantial reversal. So you'll see in just 16 trading days, the majority of the stocks on this list are down between 50 and 62%. There are a few that are behaving a little bit better than that, but you will see this is a deeply red list every single Bitcoin miner is in the red over the last 3.5 weeks. So again, to take a look at some of the larger ones, Marathon, which is the largest, down 48%, CleanSpark down 49%, Riot down 45%. At the bottom of the list, of course, you'll see Hut again down 62%, but there's a lot of these over 50%. Argo Blockchain's down 50%, and everything to the right of this is down over 50% in a period of time where you're going to see Bitcoin, as always, you're going to see Bitcoin in gold. Bitcoin was down only 4% in this same period of time. So when we get to the Bitcoin chart, you're going to see Bitcoin has been moving in a pretty tight range. So while Bitcoin's been down 4%, the Bitcoin miners are down more on the average about 50%. So once again, this is an even bigger illustration of the volatility that occurs in the Bitcoin miners. So this has been a brutal sell-off. We will take a look at a chart later that has some green on it. So it's not all bad news, but over the last 16 days, you can see this is what happened. And it's been a very big reset for a lot of these Bitcoin miners. Okay, so now I'm going to go to a chart that's even more red. This is where all the Bitcoin miners were on Friday versus their highs from the previous bull market cycle, which was in November of 2021. So for a lot of these Bitcoin miners, November of 2021 was not their all-time high, but it was a local high, and it did correspond with the all-time high for Bitcoin. So you're going to see since then, from the peak of the last bull market, the best performing company on this list is CleanSpark, and it's down 71%. So you're going to see a lot of these companies in the 80s, in the 90s. Some of these are between 95 and 99% down from their peak in the previous cycle. So this was just a little bit over 3 years ago. So I show you this for two reasons. One, again, to stress the volatility in these stocks. But two, this is what happens to these stocks. The pullback in these is dramatic. You'll see Bitcoin and gold. Bitcoin's down 40%. So in that same period of time, Bitcoin is still, although it had a fantastic 2023, up over 150%, Bitcoin's still 40% off of its highs from the previous bull market. So again, just to take a look at some of the larger Bitcoin miners, Marathon, the largest, is down 81% from its high, and that was its all-time high in November of 2021. Riot's down 78% from its highs in November of 2021. That actually was not Riot's all-time high. Riot got a lot higher than that. So some of these miners, Hive is down 89%, just under 90%. And then you're going to see four miners that I think the market is very, very concerned about. You've got TerraWolf down 96%, Any down 97%. Any is Sphere 3D. You've got stock ticker MIGI, which is Mawson, down 98% from their highs of November of 2021. And then you've got Stronghold down 99% from its highs of 2021. I do actually think some of these companies down between 89 and 99% are going to have a recovery and potentially take a run at their previous all-time highs. But as I've been saying all along, I do think there will be winners and losers going into this bull market, going into this 4-year cycle. So I think there will be plenty of winners, but it is important for you guys to do your own due diligence. This is why I continuously say that. I don't think it's going to be all Bitcoin miners straight to the moon this time around, as it has been in previous cycles. In my opinion, a lot of these companies have positioned themselves very well going into the halving. And I think those companies actually, even if they're down 70 or 80 or 90% right now, will take a run at their previous all-time high. And I think a bunch of companies on this list will go beyond their previous all-time high. Of course, again, this is my opinion. This is not financial advice. Only time will tell. We need to see. One of the key indicators is going to be, what does Bitcoin do in this bull market? So if you're bullish on Bitcoin, which I am, I believe there's a lot of positive catalysts, some of which we're in the middle of, some of which are ahead for Bitcoin. And 2022 was a crypto winter. 2023 was basically what you would call a crypto spring. We were up 150% on Bitcoin. 2024 and 2025 should be a crypto summer if this cycle mirrors the previous cycles. So I think there's every reason to believe that that will happen. In fact, I think there's more catalysts in this cycle than in any previous cycle. So that's the reason I try to show you a lot of different charts. What I try to do is just go through all of these different charts and look at these things on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, and at all types of different time frames to just see, is there any opportunities that are jumping off the page at me? Okay, with that, I do want to go to one chart that's actually green, right? Every chart we've looked at has been very red. The recent price action has been to the downside for the Bitcoin miners. Obviously, we're nowhere near back to where we were at the peak of the previous bull cycle, but I do think it's worth revisiting this chart. It is important to remember this chart is completely green. This is the chart of the performance for the entire year of 2023. So you're going to see on this chart, as always, Bitcoin is in in gold up 154%. The first thing that should jump out at you on this chart is every single Bitcoin miner is green. Every Bitcoin miner was up in the year 2023. A lot of these miners' performance was double or triple or quadruple to the upside of what Bitcoin was. So even with Bitcoin having a gigantic year to the upside, the Bitcoin miners over the course of this 12-month period were extremely green. So I think it's important to keep this in perspective. As we just looked at a bunch of red charts, we do have periods where the Bitcoin miners have big pullbacks. Inside of this green year in 2023, there was about a 14-week period in the middle where the Bitcoin miners were all down 40, 50, 60% or more. So the same thing did happen in 2023. It did sort itself out, and it all worked out in the end. So you can see gigantic moves. Marathon, the largest Bitcoin miner, was up 587%. Bitfarms, 561%. You'll see a lot of these up 300, 400, 500, 600%. I won't even include the fact that Core Scientific, which is in Chapter 11, which is kind of a unique story, so I do think this is an outlier, but this was up 1,800% in the year 2023. So you can see investments in the Bitcoin miners, if you dollar cost averaged in, were very profitable in the year 2023, even though there were difficult runs in that year. And I'm only bringing this up because we are clearly in the middle of a difficult run right now at the beginning of 2024. So we've got a lot of the year left, right? We've got 11 and a half months left in this year. We'll see how it all shakes out. I am bullish on Bitcoin. I am bullish on the Bitcoin miners, but clearly we have had a gigantic pullback over the last really 16 trading days. I don't know that it's over. I can't say, today is the bottom and it's up from here. A lot of times these things can last for a month or 2 months. In 2023, we did have a period basically that was longer than 3 months where the Bitcoin miners struggled, but right after that period, there was a massive move to the upside. So that's no guarantee that 2024 is going to be a repeat performance on that, but I do think it's important to keep it in perspective. This was the full year of 2023. All of the Bitcoin miners basically peaked on December 27th and then turned on a dime and started going straight down. So there's a couple of charts I just want to show you real quickly that I think explain what's going on here, or at least in part explain. Okay, the first one is the DXY. This is the strength of the US dollar against foreign currencies. If you take a look, starting at the beginning of December, the DXY had a big move to the downside. For almost the entire month of December, the DXY was moving down. It bottomed out. Its lowest daily candle close was on December 27th. Remember, that was the same day that all the Bitcoin miners hit their high for the year in 2023. So there was an extremely direct correlation. And then you'll see the next day, although we got a little lower, this daily candle on the 28th was green. It's basically been up from there on the DXY. So there's an inverse relationship between the Bitcoin miners and the DXY. And it's not just the Bitcoin miners. The Bitcoin miners are small cap, high growth stocks. Those stocks tend to suffer in a big way when the dollar has these moves to the upside. So we've seen this throughout the year over the course of the last year and really the last 2 years. And this one is the most obvious one. I mean, the exact day that this bottomed was the exact day the Bitcoin miners peaked, and they have moved in opposite directions ever since. This is the RTY. This follows the Russell 2000. So the Russell 2000 is the small cap stock index. So it's worth noting there are 3 Bitcoin miners in the Russell 2000. Marathon, Riot, and CleanSpark are all members of the Russell 2000. Also, MicroStrategy, which is obviously a very Bitcoin-related stock, is in the Russell 2000 as well. So you're going to see, here we go again. The Russell 2000 bottomed out in October of 2023 and had a gigantic run to the upside. And that run peaked once again on December 27th, the same day the DXY bottomed out. And then the Russell 2000 since then has had a big move to the downside. So the relationship with the DXY is not just directly with Bitcoin miners. It's more a function of the fact that it affects the Russell 2000, and the Bitcoin miners, 3 of which are in the Russell 2000, tend to more closely follow this index. In the middle of all that, in addition to that, we got CPI, which is inflation in the US. We got this data on January 11th, and you're going to see the consensus was that this was going to come in at 3.2% inflation, but it ended up coming in at 3.4%. This just accelerated the move to the downside. This was insult to injury. What this led to is this chart. This is the CME futures, this is what the market is pricing in as potential rate cuts in the year 2024. So I'm looking at the March Fed meeting. You're going to see right now there's a 46% chance built in of a 25 basis point rate cut and a 1% chance built in of a 50 basis point rate cut. So altogether, that's about 47%. If you look at where this sat just 1 week ago, and on the bottom they show this, so 1 week ago on January 12th, there was approximately a 77% chance of a 25 basis point rate cut and a 4% chance of a 50 basis point rate cut. That 80% chance of a rate cut has now moved down to a 47% chance of a rate cut. That is due in large part to the fact that the CPI data missed to the upside. So this is just another force that in the short term is negatively affecting both Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners. With all that said, I just want to finish up quickly on the Bitcoin chart itself, because with all of this negativity, you're going to see really back on December 4th, Bitcoin broke above this blue line here, which is at around 41,200, call it. So since we broke above this line on December 4th, on December 11th, we closed at exactly this point. So that is the lowest close we've had since December 4th. So this is about a 45 or 50-day window period of time. And in that time, we have not closed below this blue line. We did test it once here, and then you'll see just a few days ago on Thursday, we did test this almost to perfection. We were $50 or $60 away from this on the daily candle close, but this line did hold. So this line of support, despite the fact that we have all these candle wicks below it on the daily candle time frame, this line has held up. There is the potential that Thursday maybe was a short-term bottom. This was an important hold. Having said that, I do think there's a very reasonable chance that we could still break out to the downside, right? You can see we continue to retest this line. We're hanging out much closer to the bottom of this range than the top. And the top of this range really is just about $3,000 above. I have a green line here just under 44,200. So from 41,200 to 44,200, you're going to see from December 5th to January 21st, we've been inside this box from a daily candle close day all but 5 days. And 4 of those days were surrounding the Bitcoin ETF. So we did have a 4-day pump going into and through the ETFs being approved. And then you'll see we moved right back into this box and we have stayed. Although we have tested the bottom of this, it has held. So we're, about a month and a half into trading sideways. It's very typical for Bitcoin to spend 2 or even 3 months consolidating sideways. So one of the potential outcomes that I'll be looking for is I want to look very closely at this line at around 41,200. If we can continue to close daily candles above this, then I think there's the potential for all of the technicals to reset themselves, for Bitcoin to turn around and regain its bullish momentum and start to move back to the upside. We were looking at 48,000. We did touch that and break that really on a 1-hour candle on January 11th, and we haven't been back there since. So I am looking for Bitcoin over the course of the next 90 days to have this breakout to the upside. But I will say, I do think there's still an extremely reasonable chance that we will retest a line of support here at just under $38,000. This line goes back to the last 2 weeks of November. You can see that this purple line represented resistance for Bitcoin. We bumped into this for a couple of weeks. And the moment we broke out, the daily candle that we broke out big time to the upside and had a run up, and we've been up ever since. So we haven't had a retest in a long time, so I will not at all be surprised if we do end up retesting somewhere around 38,000. That's an 8% move from where we are as I'm making this video. That would be almost a 23% move from the top on January 11th to the bottom. So it's very typical for Bitcoin to have 20 to 25% pullbacks. So there's no guarantee of this. For me, if we get out of this 2 to 4 week period, or maybe it's even a little bit longer than that, I am very bullish in the year 2024 on Bitcoin. That is my personal opinion. It is not financial advice, so I'm not telling you to buy Bitcoin or any of these Bitcoin mining stocks. You guys need to make your own decisions, do your own due diligence, of course. So that's everything I got for you on what's going on with Bitcoin over the last week. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this and found something useful. If you did, please remember to smash the like button. And if you have not yet, please consider subscribing to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. I do think we have a lot of exciting times left ahead in the year 2024, so thanks so much for joining me, and we will see you in the next video.